All right. I just played some Sanctuary over there, and I just actually came to not really a conclusion, but just a thought. There hasn't been a lot of old school sounding U.S. power metal bands that I can think of off the top of my head that have been coming out. Because a lot of power metal bands I can think of that are new are, the European style power metal, which is a little less aggressive, or kind of a different style. I mean, what's your opinion on that? Like the old school U.S. power metal
Yeah,
crowd?
yeah. I think it's just also kind of right now it's you. I don't know. I mean, starting out would be tough because you've got all these other bands that are kind of, you know, I don't know. It's you got to be really good. So if there is a power metal band, they're going to have to be really good. I mean, you've got. I don't know if you consider a band like Iced Earth power metal, and I know obviously they're not new, but they're kind of like at what they're doing. I consider them more of a power metal band than a speed metal band, you know. But they're kind of like the top of their game for a U.S. band, you know. So I think if you had to compete with that kind of metal, because like I said, what do you consider them? I consider them more of a power metal band.
Yeah, I would say that.
I mean, it's funny because some people try to compete, like call bands like Manowar a power metal band, and I don't consider them a power metal band. I consider them more, I don't know, like just anthems and. I mean, there's power to what they do, but I just hear more of a power metal thing when I listen to a band like Iced Earth. So I just think in those genres, you'd have to either be really good or, I mean, to come up as a new power metal band would be tough. Just because, like, there's not really too much room in that genre. A lot of those bands pretty much own that. And I mean, that's a good question because probably I'm not a huge, not that I don't like power metal. I'm not really like, that's not really my forte. So I don't really, like if you ask me thrash metal, I could talk to you about that shit all day. Or, classic heavy metal. I can go on about metal. I can go through each country and tell you about different metal bands,
Right. All right. Here's a question about thrash metal, in a sense. A lot of people think. I think a lot of people get speed metal and thrash metal confused.
Yeah,
What
they do.
Yeah. How would you define the musical differences between the two genres?
Well, it's funny. It's man. I don't know if you're recording this, but you should because you're asking great questions.
Oh yeah, we are.
I just recently got asked this question from a very big magazine from Europe. I think it was called either Rock Hard or Metal Hammer or something like that. But their question was the same question, and it was easy for me because I've been around through the years of both of those genres, especially when speed metal and thrash metal were starting out. Because actually, from what I remember, speed metal was before thrash metal because the word thrash was kind of loosely thrown around, and then finally it caught on. But speed metal, I mean, I think I even have an old Metallica business card in the back room, and it says speed metal on it or power metal, one of the two. Speaking of power metal, but back to the question, I think basically the technical playing is a lot cleaner in speed metal. A lot of the thrashier thrash metal bands, they've got a little bit more dirty edge on their stuff. Like if you compare bands like Hirax and Overkill and Exodus, and Testament's a little cleaner, but they're still a thrash metal band. The bands that I consider more like speed metal would be like a band like Agent Steel. I mean, they get thrown into the thrash metal thing too, but if you really listen to a band like Agent Steel, they're technically their playing's a lot cleaner. There's a lot more melodies. The vocals are usually pretty melodic with high pitch, notes and stuff like that. So I consider a band like them, or even a band like, say, Heathen, and Heathen's considered a thrash metal band, but to me, I consider them more like a speed metal band. But it's kind of a fine line. Like it's something that can be debated forever. Like people can debate the difference between speed metal and thrash metal forever because they're probably the two closest. But I think kind of speed metal and thrash metal are like brother and sister or father and son, where like it's kind of to me like speed metal spawned thrash metal. I think just people wanted to play faster and a little bit more aggressive, So, that's kind of what I hear in those bands, but it's not putting down the speed metal bands because I think they're just as important. But like even if you listen to a band like, say, Annihilator, to me, they're more of a speed metal band, even though they get thrown into the thrash metal category. But Jeff Waters is probably one of the cleanest picking guitar players who's ever lived. When you listen to Jeff Waters picking, the guy's basically probably the cleanest, most tightest guitar player going. So I just kind of consider them more of a speed metal band. But you can call them thrash as well. I have a lot of respect for Jeff Waters. Speaking of a guy, even though he's not really an influence, I have respect for his riff writing and his guitar playing.
All right. What is a band that you would like to see be revived or get back together, or just like any band you'd love to see live again or tour with, or just any of them?
Well, I think, what's great for me, I've kind of been through that myself. So as you kind of get older, you start being a little bit more forgiving. When I was younger, it took me so long to forgive Iron Maiden for getting rid of Paul Di'Anno. You have no idea. I'm that old school. I was one of those guys who was on the fence for a while about Bruce Dickinson at first. Like I love him now, but when he first got in the band, I was kind of like, man, you got rid of Paul Di'Anno. It was hard for me. Same with AC/DC. Brian Johnson now, who I like now, when he first got in the band, I couldn't stand him because I was such a Bon Scott, and I still am. I'm loyal to Bon Scott. He's my dude, But now I've come to love Brian Johnson because also he came in and he did a damn good job. I mean, it would be so hard to fill somebody's boots, especially Bon Scott. I mean, it's like filling Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy's boots. This guy, you can't do it, But Brian Johnson's done a hell of a job. So bands that I'd like to see get back together. I mean, one thing you just remember, I told you this, and this is just a fact. You can never go back, even though we all would like to. It's like, there are people that have regrets all the time, but you should not really live your life like that. You just got to move on because you only live so long. But if I could take us back, oh man, it'd probably be like the original Venom lineup or even the early, the Cliff 'Em All lineup, maybe even before that, when they had Dave Mustaine, because I saw him through a lot of different lineups. I saw him when they had Dave Mustaine in the band. I saw him when Metallica had Ron McGovney in the band. But I think the lineup that they had when they did the first U.S. tour, and I saw them on the Kill 'Em All for One tour, that was amazing. But also I saw them when they had Dave Mustaine in the band, and to be honest with you, Metallica was probably at their most deadliest when they had Mustaine in the band. So those are a couple of bands, and I would have loved to have seen the Killers tour, like the Iron Maiden Killers tour when Paul Di'Anno was in the band. I didn't see that tour, but I would have loved to have seen that. So, and I mean, it's Thin Lizzy, the original Thin Lizzy lineup, probably the Live and Dangerous lineup. That's my favorite Thin Lizzy lineup, but like I said, though, you can never go back. I think that's why people have these obsessions, because like even for me, Randy Rhoads, I got to see him play live, and I would love to see him again, but you can't bring him back from the dead. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but yeah, I think might be Randy Rhoads, might be the number one dude, just because his talent was so superior compared to most guitar players. Yeah, I guess Randy Rhoads would be the guy I'd love to see play again. Whether it would be with Ozzy, because when I saw him with Ozzy, they weren't even called Ozzy. They were called Blizzard of Oz. So that would probably be one of the bands I'd like to see.
No, yeah, a couple of my friends really want to see Dark Angel get back together. I remember something happened to their singer a while back where if he sings, it will do something horrible to his back. But they're wondering why the other singer couldn't help out and do vocals for the band. Do you have any stories about Dark Angel?
Yeah, man, we used to tour with them all the time. Like, what's funny, back in the old days, because, see, I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this one, but, this is an open book interview. You're getting shit out of me that I probably have never told anybody. But with Dark Angel, when you're young and you're starting out, you're very competitive. We actually, in the beginning, didn't really like each other. We were basically fighting over turf. It was like a turf war. It was like, have you ever seen the movie Warriors?
Uh, I've seen bits and pieces of it. I actually haven't finished it.
Dude, you gotta watch that whole movie from beginning to end. Warriors is probably one of the greatest movies ever done. It's that fucking great, dude. So like we were talking about movies earlier, watch the movie Warriors from beginning to end, and then you gotta talk to me after that. But anyways, Hirax and Dark Angel were like the Warriors. Like it was like the baseball Furies and the Warriors fighting. You know, it's crazy. So, but now I have way more respect for them because as the years go on, you look back and you think they were a great band. You know, back in the early days, because we were all, you know, it was like a competition. You know, you didn't want to like each other because it was competition, man. They were the competition. But now I look back and they were a great band. We used to play clubs with them all the time, and those shows were amazing shows because this was the beginning of thrash metal in L.A. The only other band before us was basically Metallica and Slayer. You know, we were right around the same time, but they were a little bit before us. And basically, the shows were nothing but it was like sticking your head in a popcorn machine. That's the best way I can explain it to you. Bodies were flying everywhere. All you saw was the bottoms of people's like, you know, their high top sneakers. You just saw feet and shoes and denim vests and sweat and hair. You know, our shows were insane. I think the problem with a band like Dark Angel now is, like I said, it's hard to go back. As you get older, your body changes. Like a lot of the musicians nowadays that are still going, you actually have to stay in shape to be able to do this shit. Like getting on a plane and flying for 11 hours and then getting off the plane and playing a concert the same day is not easy to do. And that's asked of musicians all the time. So when you get in your 40s, it's a lot different when you were 25. It's easier to do that shit. But when you hit like 45, 20 years later, it's a lot tougher. So I think with Dark Angel, the problem is a lot of those guys are older. They have families. They have houses. They even have kids. Some of them have kids almost your age. So, you know, when you're busy trying to take care of your family and pay bills, and most of us didn't get into thrash metal to make money because there was no money. And still to this day, it's hard to make money doing this kind of music because it's not sellout music. We're not radio bands. We're bands that actually people have to come to the shows, buy a CD or buy a record, and that's kind of how we make our living. But Dark Angel was a great band. The shows were really wild. Gene Hoglan is a good friend of mine still to this day, and he's probably one of the best thrash metal drummers of all time. And they were a great band. Like now when people bring them up to me, I just totally give them respect and props because they were a really good band. Yeah, it's kind of sad what happened because they probably could still be one of the strongest bands going if they were still around.
All right, that's a good answer. Another question I have is concerning like technical difficulties. Some funny stories about that. Not really a technical difficulty I noticed, but I remember in one of your live shows there was a video and you're singing one of your songs. I think it was Assassins of War, and then your microphone got caught by someone in the audience, and it pulled you in the middle there, and they had to hand it you back.
Yeah, it's funny. I can remember almost every show we've ever done. That was actually in San Francisco. No, that was Portland, Oregon. There we go, which is one of my favorite places to play. Portland, Oregon. The crowd was so wild that there were kids stage diving, but sometimes if you don't see them coming, and what happened is my mic cord got wrapped around a kid's foot as he was diving back into the crowd, so the mic went with him, which that's like a classic moment. And now I realize how classic it is because people like you, when we do interviews, that I would never expect that they've seen that footage, bring up that story. So yeah, it's a true story. A kid was diving and the mic got wrapped, basically the cord got wrapped around his foot and he flew into the crowd and the mic got ripped out of my hands while I was singing. It's pretty funny actually. But with us, we actually love all that shit. Like, we're one of the few bands that you really gotta like fucking, you know, unplug an amp or you know, break something or, you know, kill one of the foot pedals because our guitar players have foot pedals to make us mad. We don't get mad about stuff like that. When we play concerts, the concerts are usually very wild, and we don't mind people stage diving or slam dancing. That's just part of what we do. We've been doing this for a long time, so it's not a big deal to us when people stage dive. We actually love it.